Oh, and let me add, I was actually only the third Black woman in the entire state to join a panel of mediators and work full time there.
No way.
Yes, third.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Defense Never Rests. I'm your host, Trisha Baxter, and today joining me for a third time, but her first appearance as a co-host, is Talar Herculean Kersey. Talar, welcome back. How are you?
I am good. Thanks for having me. I keep coming back. You can't get rid of me.
I can't get rid of you. I love you to death. You know, my editor loves you too.
Does he?
Yeah, he's like, he said she has a personality, and I'm like, that is for certain. So
I'm like, well, I'm going to take that as a compliment because you could interpret that in a lot of ways.
No, it was totally meant as a compliment.
Okay, good.
Like,
good.
He was like, after, I can't remember which one. Maybe it was the one that you first did, which was your story. He was like, it was very deep and very like personal, right? And I love that. I think if we can do a personal episode and get vulnerable, that's great. And then the one that you asked me questions, he was more of like, this is really entertaining. It's fun. Like,
good.
We have multiple sides to us.
We do, definitely. And you and I, we need a few more episodes where we can actually dive into all our different personalities. I've got several more.
Oh, good. All right. We'll have to bring them out at one point. So today we are talking mediation. We have done a mediation podcast before. We did it pre-COVID, but we thought now that things have really changed, the normal is no longer normal. We figured we revisit mediation and figure out how it's changed COVID. And also just revisit some of the questions that we asked our first go around and some other mediators, because it's always good to get different perspectives from different people. So on today's episode, joining us is Winter Wheeler. She is a mediator in Atlanta, Georgia, although she has a national practice. And she's barred in Florida, Georgia, and New York. And she's fascinating. She spent the first 14 years in private practice, but really, or I think it's like 20, maybe it was like 17 years in private practice. My math, lawyers and math, never a good mixture. But I think it was
14.
Like 17. Was it 14? Okay.
Yeah.
She spent a good chunk of private practice, but she knew very early on that she wanted to be a mediator.
Amazing.
Isn't that like, who knows that? Like,
I've never heard that before. Never. I've heard of people who wanted to be a lawyer early on, you know, or at least what kind of law. I have never heard anybody say, I would like to be a mediator. I mean, that early in their career. I think that's amazing. Absolutely.
Her perspective as a Black woman.
Right.
And a Black woman mediating in Atlanta, Georgia, where you think of as a large Black population, that she would be a dime a dozen, you would think, but she talks about how that she's not a dime a dozen. Even in a predominantly Black community, Black mediators are still unicorns. So it's interesting to get her perspective on that too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm so excited to hear about what mediation looks like in the COVID era. You know, I've been to a Zoom wedding and I've done Zoom birthday parties and book clubs, but a Zoom mediation, I can't wait to hear how that works out.
Well, on that note, let's bring her in. I don't want to wait any longer. So with that, without further ado, welcome Winter. Hey, Winter, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. This is exciting. We've met virtually through a networking group, but we've never spoken.
That's right.
So this is going to be awesome. I get to know you. Talar gets to know you. It's going to be very cool. I want to start by really focusing on your expertise, which is mediations. Tell us how you got there, your legal journey, and why you ended up becoming a mediator.
Wow.
Got a lot of questions?
That's a big question, right? That covers 14 years of my life. So, you know, I'm one of these rare people who always knew they wanted to be a mediator. A lot of people go into mediation as a retirement plan. And let me tell you, you don't want to do this in retirement. It's a lot of work. It's hard work. But anyway, I got lucky and I met someone who was an amazing mediator back in 2007. So I was maybe not even a year into my legal career. And I realized that I wanted to do exactly what he was doing. And so the advice that he gave me was to make sure I had a varied legal practice and, get a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas, network, mingle, meet as many people as you can, and, make it happen. And so that's what I did. And you can tell by my resume. And so lots of different practice areas, different law firms. And I remember having several conversations with many different employers, with them telling me I needed to focus and, pick one specialty and stick with that. Well, the problem was none of these people ever bothered to ask me what my goal was or what I was trying to do. So I just would politely smile and say thank you and keep it moving and hop to the next genre. So at 14 years in, I looked at my husband and I said, I think I'm ready. I think I'm beyond ready. I think it's time. We've got 4 children. I hate, it sounds so crazy to me when I say that out loud. We've got 4 children. We're not going to have any more. I think it's time for me to go ahead and make that jump. And he said, yeah, I mean, why not? And I did. I don't believe in luck. I think that everything happens because it's supposed to happen exactly when it's supposed to happen. And let me back up a little bit, actually. So I moved to Georgia 10 years ago. Well, this was a little more than 10 years ago, but I moved to Georgia and I fell in love with this mediation firm called Miles Mediation and Arbitration. And 10 years ago, I said, I'm going to work there. That's going to happen for me. And a year ago, it did exactly happen that way. It's the first firm that I started mediating with. So
when you went to law school, what did you think your job would be? What would you do with that law degree?
Oh, that's an entirely different conversation because when I went to law school, I didn't really want to go to law school. So I didn't have a plan or any thoughts about what that might look like when I got there. When I left, I thought that I was going to be a criminal defense attorney, actually. And that's what I did at first. And it lasted all of 8 months. And yeah, that doesn't even appear on my resume anymore because it was such a short time and it's so irrelevant to what I do now.
But you tried it and you're like, okay, not for me. I thought I might like it, but not what I want to do. Not at all.
Not at all. I'm still very interested in the criminal justice system. What I learned is that I don't want to change it from the inside.
So, why did you go to law school? How did you decide to do that?
Oh, well, that decision was basically made for me.
Oh, I'm familiar with that.
So I went to Georgetown University undergrad. That was another thing that I focused on and decided was going to happen and made happen over the course of several years. I think I was 13 or 14 years old when I decided that was where I was going to go. And I wanted to be part of the School of Foreign Service. I wanted to be a foreign service officer. So what did I do? I joined the School of Foreign Service. And I moved to Madrid at the age of 19. I lived there until I was 21. But of course, during that time, and I'm about to age myself, 9/11 happened. The response from global citizens, I'll say, was so negative and anti-American that I decided I no longer wanted to be a part of the Foreign Service. It was just something that was too emotional for me. I was too young to handle that. And so I decided I wanted to move back home. And I did. I was 21. I graduated from college and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my parents said, there's no gap year happening in this family. You're not going to hang out at home. So you need to get a job and support yourself and, get an apartment, all of those things. And I didn't have, clue the first of how I was going to do that. So the alternative option they gave me was to go to grad school, specifically law school. And thankfully I applied, got in, and did that.
Were either one of your parents lawyers?
I come from a long line of attorneys, but no, neither one of my parents were lawyers. My mother was a homemaker. She did not work outside of my dad's office. My dad was actually a neurologist, so she worked with him. But my uncle, my aunt, like lots of people in my family were lawyers, and since I can't count past 100, they they said there's no science happening for you, honey. Go to law school.
So with your time in Madrid, does that mean you speak Spanish?
I do. I do.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'm also from Miami, so.
So lots of Spanish. I took 6 years, 4 years in high school and then 2 years in college. And puedo hablar mejor cuando estoy borracha.
I knew you were going to do that. I knew it.
Todo
And
el
I'm going to
mundo,
be like,
yeah?
I have no idea what she's saying.
Do you know what I said? What did I say, Winter?
She said she speaks Spanish better when she's drunk. And I said, like the entire world, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm fluent when I've been drinking. But that's wonderful. Have you found being bilingual helping you in your work?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's very helpful. Growing up in Miami, I spoke Spanish anyway. So it's been helpful my entire life. But up here, we do have a very large Spanish speaking population. It's helpful with clients. We have a lot of attorneys here who don't speak Spanish, or who don't speak Spanish natively or fluently. And so I do speak to their clients, just very generally. I would never speak to an attorney's client about their case without their permission in another language. But yes, it does help make people feel a lot more comfortable and make them feel better about the process, knowing that I can understand them when they speak to me about what's going on. And, a lot of mediation is just providing empathy.
Right.
So if someone starts to cry, which happens a lot in mediation, I'm able to comfort them in their first language, and that is extremely helpful.
So what did you do after you decided the criminal defense practice was not for you? What was your next stop?
Oh, I did exactly what my parents were hoping I would never do. I moved right back home into their house without a job, so that they did, in fact, have to support me for a little while. No, I'm kidding. Not about moving back home, but I did have a job. So, and I paid rent. Can you believe that? They actually charged me rent. And
I would do the same thing. I would do the same thing to my daughter. So
it was expensive rent, living in South Florida, but whatever. I won't go there. That's a different story. I moved home and I started working at a civil defense firm, a very large civil defense firm called Conroy Simberg.
And how long did you stay there?
Oh gosh, 2.5 years.
Was it there that you made the realization of what you wanted to do, or did you make another move?
No, it was there.
Okay.
What
do you think drew you to it? I mean, I think you're 4 years out of law school. I think very few people get the epiphany at 4 years out.
Oh, I was not. I wasn't even 4 years out. I think for me, it was, goodness, I'm an empath, right? So when I finally had the experience several times over of mediating a case, as the attorney, it resonated with me. And it was very clear to me that was something that I should be doing. It wasn't a hard sell on me. I really enjoyed what the mediator was doing, how he was approaching people, how people were responding to him, and the feedback that I would receive from the opposing party of what had happened in their room, because, obviously I wasn't in there. And then talking to other attorneys about the process, after the fact, after their mediations and things like that. And then, of course, being the incredible nerd that I am, just talking to anyone I could about mediation and studying it. I loved it. I did. I really got lucky having that epiphany very early on.
So it's interesting. You had all these experiences in mediations, and I'm thinking back to my time in private practice. And most of the mediators, I noticed you kept referring to him as the mediator. Most of my mediations, when I was the attorney, the mediator was a man. Was that your experience as well?
Yes, and it still is. Yes, absolutely. Most mediators are men. They are, I don't want to insult anybody, but they're significantly older than I am, I'll say. They are typically white, non-Hispanic. Yes.
Yeah, I would say that's the case too. And I would say, I was going to ask you this, is if you found it hard to break into mediations, because a lot in the Philadelphia area, the tried and trusted, if you will, mediators are the old judges, the retired judges.
Right.
There's this concept that they've had this 30 plus years of experience on the bench, and they've seen and done it and know it all, that it's harder, at least in my area, I think, for younger people to break into, and women to break to, people of color to break into. What has been your experience like?
Exactly what you described. It's been hard. And like I said, at the beginning, it's a really difficult career. It's hard to get started. But I knew that, I knew that 14 years ago. So I was able to, start working on that back then. So I have been building a network for that entire time, really. And frankly, that's what's helped me get as far as I have, as quickly as I have. And because I've only been a full-time mediator for, it's been under a year at this point. It'll be an entire year in November. So, so it's been a short time and I've accomplished a lot. But yeah, it's really, really difficult. I don't want to speculate on the reasons as to why that is, but yes, that's pretty standard. A lot of people do like to go with judges, depending on your case. Sometimes having an evidentiary authority is helpful. It can be, but a lot of that can be resolved by having difficult conversations with your client. If your client, is a little bit less sophisticated, which for the most part, if you're talking about a client who's not an attorney, that's what you need. You need to have those conversations, and you need to have them early, because a lot of people don't understand the rules of evidence. They're complicated. A lot of lawyers don't understand the rules of evidence, right? But judges, in my opinion, as someone who has mediated a lot of cases as an attorney, they don't always make the best mediators. They're used to telling you what to do, and not helping you make your decisions, not helping you negotiate, not helping you reframe your arguments. So, judges are good at tons of things, and ex-judge mediators are fantastic. One of my favorite mentors is a former judge. So I'm not dissing all judge mediators, but they have a specific skill set. And so you need to be very careful when selecting them.
I was going to say the same thing. And this is not to disparage judges, but it is very much like, I think it's hard for them if they've been on the bench for 40 some years and they've had that rule of law, like what I say goes, and they've had that experience for 40 years, that's hard to undo. So unless you're really empathetic judge on the bench, it's hard to translate into an empathetic mediator. Mm-hmm. So I tend to stay away from recently retired judges and wait and see, the feedback that you get. But yeah, one of my favorite mediators in the Philadelphia area is a woman I had on the podcast when we started podcasting, Barbara Lyons, and she's not a judge. She's been doing mediations for 20 years. And it's because of that, the empathy that she legitimately takes time to understand everybody's position. And I've told her I like working with her because she manipulates me and I don't even know that she's manipulating me. So I'm with you. What can you talk about once you made a decision that you knew you were going to mediate? And then I think what you said it was like 10 years before you took the leap, right? Is that
14?
14 years. Okay, sorry. 14 years before you took the leap. What kind of stuff did you do to gear up for, the networking and the skill set that you thought you needed?
Oh my goodness. Well, I always tell this super stupid joke, right? I call myself an extroverted extrovert with extrovert tendencies. So you'll find me absolutely everywhere. Pre-COVID, I was out every single day. I would typically have a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, drinks every single day. And that includes when I had a full-time, career job and was getting a paycheck. So I was just a very, very busy person, constantly working, and also managing to take care of 4 children. I looking back, I'm like, how in the world did I do all of that? I was exhausted, but I did it. And that was what was required of me to get to this position. And I needed to do a lot of volunteer work. And by volunteer work, I do mean not just showing up to the meetings and having my face seen. I mean volunteering to be the chair of the committee, put on the program, be the moderator, sit in that chair, learn the material, be the guest, whatever they asked you to do, go ahead and do it, no matter what it takes. So I did not sleep much for many, many years. My oldest child is 9 years old, so I probably haven't slept in a decade. It's not easy. It's not easy. And it's funny because people always tell me, the past year, they're like, oh, you came out of nowhere. And I'm like, that's what you think. That's what it looks like. I've been working at this for a very long time.
Well, so let's talk about the switch then. You said November of 2019, you went all in on mediation. How was that an easy decision? Was it a difficult one? Okay. Tell us about that process.
That was a very tough decision. And it was a decision that I didn't make initially. I was definitely going to straddle that fence for a while. I loved the law firm that I was at. I was at this large firm in town called Swift Curry. Shout out Swift Curry. I loved it there. And I was there for about 2 years. And I got the amazing opportunity to work at Miles Mediation. And I could have done both at the same time. At Miles, I'm an independent contractor, not an employee, those two things. So working at the law firm did not conflict. And any money that I would have made at Miles would have gone directly to the law firm. So it was, a symbiotic kind of thing. It would have helped me toward, my goals at the law firm, all of that. And so I was going to do both. And I knew that it was probably not the best idea because I was already exhausted, trying to do everything at the same time, but I was going to do it. And when I was having conversations with leadership, they were, initially they were excited because, to be 38, to be 38 and to have the opportunity to work at Miles Mediation was a huge deal. It was big news around the state that I did that. And let me add, I was actually only the 3rd Black woman in the entire state to join a panel of mediators and work full time there.
No way.
Yes, 3rd.
That's insane.
It's insane. So when I went full time, that was the moniker. Yeah. But anyway, I digress. So isn't that crazy? But I said I wasn't going to continue to talk about that. But but in my conversations with leadership, as initially it was very positive, and then slowly I think they started to realize just how busy I already was to begin with, and it got decreasingly the positivity decreased. I'll put it as nicely as possible. And eventually I had a conversation with one of the women there, senior equity partner. And I was horrified when this conversation went down. So I won't say her name, but she knows who she is. And she told me that I would never be successful as a mediator.
Wow.
I shouldn't bother trying. And she didn't know anyone who was a successful mediator. Mind you, 3 other of her partners work at Miles Mediation. So that was interesting. And she, and I quote, said, Winter, if you're devoting all this time to build a client base as a mediator, what kind of horsepower are we getting out of you? And I was just horrified at the thought of this woman using the term horsepower, because I don't know, I had never heard such a thing. And I was like, did she call me a horse? Is this like a reference to like mules and Black women? Is it that racist trope? And just my mind just started to race. And I was furious. And I was already thinking it was going to be too much work, like I said. And I was like, well, maybe this is the sign God wanted me to have, and went back to my desk. I called my husband and I said, you know what? This isn't it. I'm not doing this. I'm done. And he was like, oh, thank God, get out of there. And I quit that day.
Wow.
You know, I think it's fascinating you're saying that you're only the 3rd Black woman to be on a mediation panel. And we're talking about Georgia. We're not talking about like Alaska or, some other place like Utah, I find that amazing. But you know what I also wonder? I absolutely believe that diversity has value in the skills, the experiences, and all these other qualities that people from different places and walks of life can bring to a situation, but especially in mediation. And so I wonder, what has your experience been in terms of the qualities and skills that you can bring to mediation, being a woman of color that perhaps, an older white man isn't going to be able to bring? And also on top of that, being bilingual as well.
Okay, so let me clarify a little bit. So when I say I was the 3rd Black woman to be full-time on a major panel, what I mean by that is a major private panel up here. And we have, I'm not going to name them, but we have Miles Mediation, and there are a number of other notable mediation firms at which one would want to work, right? And I was then only the 3rd to work full-time, like not have a law practice to fall back on. So that's what I mean. So there are other, I don't know how many Black women were working as mediators kind of in general. I have no idea. But to be on those major panels where you're actually going to make a good deal of money, I was the 3rd.
Yeah.
And another thing, I do not consider myself to be a woman of color. I'm a Black woman.
Okay.
That's, again, another conversation, but I'd like to point that out. But yes, the question of, I bring a lot of different things. I bring a completely different perspective. Just my worldview is entirely different. And it's interesting because I, grew up with a lot of non-Black people. I went to an international high school. I am married to a white man from Maine. I have a lot of different perspectives, and I can see the world from a lot of different vantage points. But yes, I am a Black woman, and that is clearly the perspective that I lead with, right? And I do. I have the same vantage point as the majority of the people who live in the city that I live in. And yet we are still the minority, the overwhelming minority when it comes to dispute resolution. This is Atlanta.
Right.
Atlanta is a very Black city. Most of our leadership is Black. Georgia is a very Black state. And so it is odd, and it is unusual, and it is uncomfortable that we don't have more Black mediators, arbitrators, case evaluators, special masters, whatever type of neutral you're looking for, alternative dispute resolution, whatever you want to call it. It's odd that we don't have more Black people, and in general, women in general bring a new perspective. And so white women, whatever, we don't have enough women. Women are we're known to be more caring, more compassionate. We're by nature nurturing. And when you're talking about lawsuits that involve people and their feelings, and it doesn't matter what the area of law is in that regard, if someone owns that company, there's a person with feelings behind it. We need to be aware of that, cognizant of it. And if you are, you're going to be more equipped to help them resolve that case. It's not always just about dollar figures. It's not always just about you breached this contract and I'm completely devoid of emotion about it. I just want you to fulfill it. No, a lot of the time it's you've hurt my personal feelings and this is why. And if you apologize and also pay me some money, I might get over it. But, a lot of people don't realize that, don't recognize that. And so sometimes your dispute might go on for longer than it should. So, yeah.
I think that's fascinating. And I have a similar experience. I'm in Philadelphia, which is it's a Black city. It's a large Black population. Pennsylvania isn't, but Philadelphia is. And I can't honestly think of one Black mediator. I mean, that's sad. And maybe it's my own experience, my own bias. When this airs, I'm going to do the research to figure out if we have any go-to Black mediators in Philadelphia, because that shocks me.
Well, yeah. I have a national practice. So.
Okay. All right. I will remember that.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my time in private practice, which was 10 years. I think I can say I never mediated with a Black woman for certain. I can say with 100% certainty. And I'm pretty sure I never mediated with any Black person.
Yeah, mine includes Black women, Black men. I've mediated with white women. My mediations with white men that's the majority. But as far as any other or diverse mediator, they're few and far between.
So I was wondering, Winter, you were saying, and it is just so amazing to think that, you're living in this community, in this population that is predominantly Black, and yet these people that the mediator that you're supposed to be trusting with such an important decision, you may not be able to relate to because whether it's the color of their skin or because of their gender, whatever the case. I'm wondering, you as a Black mediator, have you found that that's actually been to your advantage in your practice, since there aren't necessarily as many of you around?
No,
really.
I would think the opposite too. I would think people
really
choose, like you would get that prejudice.
No, absolutely not. It is no. Mm-mm. No, people don't understand why it would be advantageous to have a diverse mediator. They don't understand it. I have gotten my clients the old-fashioned way, and people a lot of the time they choose their mediator, of course, based on the fact that you have experience and they know that you know what you're talking about, but also because they just like you. So those years of networking and meeting people really worked out, but it's not, nobody is calling me up saying, I have this issue with this and my client is Black, so I want you to relate to them. No, I haven't had that experience. If that is a reason that someone has hired me, no one has expressed that to me. So I'm going to have to say no on that.
I find that fascinating. I mean, at least for me, and I was going to ask you this question too, if you know the answer in terms of, how do your clients select you? If you do ask them, do you have like you know how when you go buy something and they tell you, where were you referred from? Was it Google or Yelp or whatever? If you have some sort of survey like that. But I remember, when I was mediating, my criteria was it's got to be somebody my client's going to be able to trust, because I need the mediator's support for my client control. And then sometimes more importantly, it was going to be, who is my opposing counsel's client going to trust? Because I need to make sure that they're going to be able to relate and trust whatever the mediator says. And I got to say, more often than not, that was my default. I wanted to defer to who does the opposing side want and who's going to get the best client control in that situation. So I do want to ask the question that I said I was going to ask, and now I will actually ask it out loud in my outside voice to you, Winter, so that you can hear it out loud. And that question is, do you know or have an understanding of how the parties select a mediator? Besides experience, what are they looking for?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know. I know what I looked for as a lawyer, but I don't, in my mediator chair, I don't know what people look for. They don't tell me.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think I would choose the same way. Like I would choose a mediator, one, to make sure that somebody the plaintiff themselves will listen to. Like that's, but I also want somebody who's going to be fair to my client. I've been in mediations where what the mediator has said to my client made me look bad, because it was just nasty, or they were just telling him what to do. And I'm like, oh my God, do not tell my client what to do. Like that's
terrible.
But I want to pivot to actual talking about mediation. I want to get into that expert mind of yours. And talk about what us defense attorneys, and for my client base claims adjuster, and for the general counsel of the world, how we can make it more effective. So let's start with this question. Obviously, the world has changed since when you started mediating. Have you seen, let's just talk about COVID right now. What has been the biggest, from a COVID perspective, what's been the biggest change in mediation that you've seen?
Oh, well, the fact that I now do it online. This was not an option when I first started. I got lucky when I first started that I had a lot of clients right out the gate, which is basically unheard of, but happened for me. And then in March of this year, I was, our office closed to in-person mediations for a while. And I was just, oh my God, is my brand new business like done, or are we over? And I can laugh about it now, but at the time I was devastated, because I thought everything was just kaput, right? And so we managed to quickly pivot online. And so what I've done a lot of is convincing people that it's cool to do mediations online. They do still work, and they work very well, actually. So that's been huge. And then, of course, we've got the issue of no longer having looming trial dates, which is rapidly changing as well across jurisdictions. So that had an effect with people not having the looming trial dates. And we like to call the trial hammer. People were less likely to want to negotiate, less likely to want to settle, less likely to want to mediate. And to want to mediate for, higher case values. And so it affected how many mediations I had, who I had them with was also interesting. The carriers that were mediating shifted. So yeah, that's basically the main changes.
So Winter, it's been a while since I've been in mediation, even though I love it. I'm such a fan. I'm really a fan. I mean, I'd like your autograph after this is all over, if that's okay. Um, but I'm trying to imagine, now, in the COVID world, where we do everything virtual, I got to attend a virtual wedding. I've had virtual birthday parties, virtual book clubs, lots of stuff that you're not quite sure how you make virtual. But can you describe, how do you make a mediation virtual? Do you have, like a joint caucus with the Brady Bunch, and then you drop them into rooms, and how do you? I remember some of the most important conversations I had at mediation were, for example, as the defense counsel, I would pull aside the plaintiff's counsel and we would go off into a room together. And it might not even be talking about the case, but to get to know each other and establish rapport. Or I might get to do the same with the mediator without my client present. How do you navigate those things in a virtual world?
The same way. It's definitely different, but you can still do those things. And again, I have a natural ability to understand when those things need to happen. On Zoom, we have the breakout rooms. So it makes it pretty easy to move people around. But when I realize that there needs to be a conversation between the attorneys, I'll come up with some excuse as to why I need to move someone or talk to someone about something. It's more complicated. I can't say, oh, Mr. So-and-so, this package arrived and I need help picking it up. I can't do that to get you out of the room, but I can come up with something to move you somewhere and then tell you, hey, I think you need to have a conversation because of this. And then, ask you to agree to do that and then move the other person in. It's definitely possible. It still happens. And then, also we still have telephones. We have email. If you want to talk to someone, nothing is stopping you from talking to them. If you want me to be involved, you just tell me. I can make anything happen that you want to have happen. I can facilitate anything that you want to have happen the exact same way that I did before.
So what would you say are the pros and cons of virtual mediation?
Well, the obvious pro is that you can do it from your house. You don't have to go anywhere.
That's a good plus, by the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Atlanta traffic is insane. It takes at least an hour to get anywhere. So if you want to be on time, you need to leave an hour and a half early. You can roll in with your pajama pants on. Please put on a real shirt. And still make it to your Zoom meeting on time. And so that is huge. And when you're talking about mediation, because it's such a long process most of the time, most of my mediations go 8, 10, 12 hours. If you have things to do, you can still go do those things and come back. So that multitasking that you could have done somewhat while sitting in the mediation firm, you can do more so from your house.
Winter, not to cut you off, but that's exactly what I'm doing. I am cutting you off. I'm Miss Obvious, stating the obvious for you here. I can see how that's a benefit, and I just love it. You could, cook, you could clean, you could do some origami, paint, knit, whatever.
Origami?
Everybody's,
origami.
I did out loud, whatever you want. I just want to be very inclusive in whatever activities people like. But, and perhaps you were getting there with the cons. I remember the fact that you're stuck in a room and you got to make a decision before you get to go out, that was actually, I felt like, a benefit to the in-person mediation. Have you found that, that affects that, concept affects your ability to, of your toolbox of mediation tools to either be able to conclude or resolve the mediation?
Sometimes. It depends on the case, right? Not every case is ready to be mediated at all. And not every case is ready to be mediated online. And so I ask my clients, if you have any hesitation or you have any doubt, call me and we can talk through that and figure out if it needs to be in person or if it's okay to do it online and we work through that together. But for sure, some cases do not need to be mediated online. And if you need that, you need the formality of being in my office, then that's what we do.
I think you're so right, because like that was so sometimes we use mediation just to get the other side in the room, because they won't call me back or they won't respond, but getting them in the room, they can't walk out on me, or the thought of them walking out would be seen as rude. So getting him in a room is like I'm getting him in a chair and I'm like, you're going to talk settlement with me. But virtual mediations are different. We've had plaintiffs just hang up. Like, and that would strike me, maybe we should have done that work ahead of time. Maybe we should have said, this isn't for virtual, this should be in person. What's your experience in that respect?
I have had people hang up. It does happen. But what I've noticed is that they come right back. So I will have someone, because people still want to engage in the melodrama, right? That's still a thing. And so what they'll do is turn off their cameras or mute themselves and pretend they're gone. They're not gone. They're still there. They'll leave and then they'll call me on my cell phone. Please don't tell anyone I actually left. I'm still here. Like, okay. So I would say that even though those things technically happen, they're for show for the most part. And then in addition, it's so easy to set these up that I think people are less concerned with some of that. But I also think that one of the best things about mediation, whether it's in person or virtual, is if you, the attorney, can't get someone to respond to you, or you can't get them to be polite to you, they are far more likely to be polite to me because I've had nothing to do with it. They're going to take being rude to me far more seriously than being rude to the attorney they've been arguing with for a year plus, right? So that's another reason to use mediation, just to have an intermediary. People are not likely to be rude to me.
I wanted to ask, Winter, do you have a type of case that's your favorite to mediate? Are there kinds that you like and the ones that you don't, like certain subject areas or anything like that? I mean, I can't imagine mediating like a construction defect case.
What are you talking about?
No.
Yeah.
No, I like those. I mean,
really?
I'm with Winter.
I like those. They're complicated and there are lots of people to deal with, lots of personalities. I like that.
Okay.
I mean,
Wow.
not everybody wants to be a mediator. So, I mean, I might be the wrong person. I mean, I also took the New York bar because I thought it would be fun. So,
Yeah, you're crazy. You're
okay.
crazy.
yeah, I'm licensed in 3 states because I took 3 bar exams. So,
what are the 3 states?
Georgia, Florida, and New York.
Wow. Good night. That's something special.
So what would you say to attorneys that you see them doing that you want them to stop doing, that it's just wrong? Stop doing X, Y, and Z. Give us some intel.
Oh my gosh. Attorneys frequently make very, very clear, to me at least, that they have never bothered to tell their client the truth ever about their case. It's crazy. Sometimes, and at least sometimes they'll call me in advance and tell me, hey, Winter. So my client thinks that this is a $5 million case. It's probably worth closer to 30 grand. If you could get me like 60 or I'm not like, okay, we have several problems here. I'm a mediator. I'm not getting you anything. If you know your case is worth $30,000, I guarantee you the other side knows it's worth $30,000. So that's probably what we're looking at. And you need to have that conversation with your client now. So yeah, please talk to your clients in advance about realistic goals of where the client's case may settle, because I I mean, I can have those conversations, I will, but.
So do you, after you've gotten all the submissions, do you have an idea of what a healthy range or settlement looks like? And then how do you, or if you, do you deal with not just the plaintiff or the defendant, but if the collective party has an unrealistic expectation? So if it's not just the client, but it's the attorney that says, this isn't a $30,000 case, this is a $5 million case. How do you navigate that scenario?
Oh, 100%. That happens a lot too. It happens all the time. And you have the opposite. I know you're a defense attorney.
Well, we're always realistic, right?
Right. Always,
Exactly.
always. So, you have plaintiffs' lawyers who think that their case is worth way more than it is. And then you have defense attorneys who think that the case is worth far less than it actually would be. And I've worked both sides of the V. So I can see it in both directions. And then I also just happen to be a human in America. So I have a good feel for where these things might go and how your average juror might think. And so, what I do is a lot of reality testing. I ask a lot of questions. I reframe arguments, because by the time you get to me, you probably have argued with opposing counsel over and over again about the exact same points repeatedly using the same language. It's not helpful. And so having my perspective, using different language, couching your arguments in a distinct way, that helps a lot. And I am not the type of mediator to offer my opinion unless it's solicited. If I think that you're not hearing me, or you're not hearing the other side, and that you're being completely unreasonable about it, I will say, I think that they have a point, and I would like to tell you why. And typically people say, "Oh, yeah, tell me. Like, what am I missing? Am I missing something?" And really, it's how you approach people. I have never, ever, ever had anyone say to me, "No, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm here to make a point myself." Like, I've never had that.
And I love that. I love when it comes authentically at me, because that's one reason you go to mediation too, is that one of the benefits that we get is an outside opinion of our case, which you try to do, but sometimes you can't get out of your own way or out of your own head. Sometimes I wonder if mediators are doing it just to get me off of my position, or if it's real. But I think the way that you set it up just now, I would be all ears. I'd be like Talvade. So I think that's a great point, because I think there are some mediators that do put a number on it without being asked. And I'm not sure, like you said, I'm not sure that's a good idea, because you really want the parties to get there, right? You don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, having been a litigator as long as I have, I have a number in my head, because that's just how I work. That's how I function. But I would never suggest a number. I would never hint at a number. I would never try to help anybody get to a specific number. I mean, that's not my role at all. The parties need to get where the parties want to get. You come in and you talk to me, maybe you provided me with some information or a report, or we've had a phone call, but you've lived, breathed, that case inside and out. I don't. So my opinion is based on the little bit of information that I have. And so my goal is just to support the parties in getting where they want to be.
Let me ask you your opinion on two kind of techniques that I've seen in mediation. One is, do you believe in watching the midpoint? I have clients that watch the midpoint constantly. And do you believe in brackets? We use them sometimes. I know some people hate them. You could take both of them, neither of them, one of them or the other. What do you think of those approaches?
Oh God. So my opinion has changed between being a litigator and being a mediator. So as a litigator, I watched midpoints, hated brackets. As a mediator, I don't watch midpoints, and I love brackets. So I advise people not to watch midpoints ever. Midpoints don't mean anything. No one, typically people are not signaling midpoints. but be aware that other people are watching your midpoint, right? So I'll deliver the message and say, don't watch the midpoint. They're still watching the midpoint. I hate midpoints. I don't think people should watch them. I'm very clear with people. I do not want you to think that you're signaling. And I tell people when they're coming up with proposals, and if they ask me to help them come up with a proposal, I do not consider midpoints when developing proposals. When I develop a number, it really has to do with what I think is going to get a response out of the other side, what's not going to be insulting, and what's going to propel the negotiation and what's going to get movement. It has nothing to do with a case value or anything of the sort. And then with brackets, same thing.
What do you think is the benefit of bracketing?
Brackets are great because once your brackets touch, you're really in the ballpark. That means you're going to settle that day. And attorneys don't ever feel that way. They're still very, very negative. They're like, I can't believe this bracket. I'm like, no, this bracket's great. And they look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, no. Trust the process, my dear. Trust the process. And I've got this very like Zen-like vibe to me. And they're just, all up in arms, like, this is ridiculous. They're being so crazy with this bracket. I'm like, but the bracket touches yours. And then, oh my goodness, my face when the brackets start to overlap.
Like done and done.
We are done.
One thing on just strategy I want to get to before we move on, because I know we're running short on time, is what do you think about the inching, like the incremental? Like I have clients that will go from 15, like a $10 million demand. They'll start at 10,000. They'll go to 15,000. The 10 million will go to 9.9 or whatever. What do you think of that? Or do you think, or does it even matter? Should people move faster?
I think the only person who benefits from that is me.
You're going to be there for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said a little while ago, everyone knows where that case is headed. If you know it's worth $1 million, the other side knows it's worth $1 million. I know it's worth $1 million. The only person who may not know that is the poor plaintiff, who may think that it's actually worth the 10 million, right? So we need to get there. We need to get there quickly. I mean, we can do it in the tiny increments, but there's no need for it.
So I wanted to find out, what do you think about early mediation in cases? I mean, putting aside your obviously personal bias because you're a mediator and it means more business for you, hopefully, but putting that aside, just as a mediator in terms of whether or not that case is ripe and has the potential for resolution, how do you feel about that? Or do you feel like, you need to get through some discovery before you come to me?
Again, it really depends on the case. When we're talking about cases with, clear liability and the question really has to do with how much you're going to pay, early mediation makes a ton of sense, because otherwise you're just spending a ton of money on litigation for absolutely no reason. And then, the money just goes into a different pocket. So it really depends on how much you value your cost savings and where you want to put that. Like, do you want to save time? Do you want to save effort? Like, what do you want to do? What's your goal? For a lot of these cases, you don't need a ton of discovery. If someone has died and it's your fault, figure out how much you're going to pay them.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of early mediation too, because I think, you can make a lot of assumptions about the things that you don't know. And it's a great way to get to credibility. Like you get to more often than not hear from the plaintiff themselves if they're still alive. You get to hear from them. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, another thing is with early mediation, and this happens a lot with my cases, actually, people will use it for fact-finding. And so it's not necessarily for resolution, but it's a time to bring everyone together. And if they want to do some circumvention of discovery, we'll bring everyone And I will run back and forth doing a lot of question and answer. And that way the parties can have a full conversation, but it's diluted to, I guess, for lack of a better term, through me. So I'm having conversations with the attorneys, and we're working through like, what are the best questions to ask? And everybody knows that I'm doing this. So it's not, when we go into this type of mediation, everybody knows that that's what's happening, right? There are no surprises here. And I'll go back and I'll ask those questions, and then we'll talk about, what are you going to answer? What are you not going to answer? How much of the information am I actually allowed to hear that comes out of your client's mouth? I often get kicked out of the room when the client, the plaintiff or the defendant actually starts to talk, and then I get those answers and then I deliver them. So a lot of that happens in mediation as well. So there are a lot of different ways to use a mediator. Sometimes we're just an intermediary in the discovery process.
Well, I love that. I do have to make this the last question because we are running short on time. But before I get into wrapping it up, one last question. If you could talk to the people that I bring to mediations, the VP of claims, the claims adjusters, what do you think they can do or should not do to make the mediation more effective?
One thing that I see go wrong very, very frequently is the claims adjuster or the representative for the insurance company not having all of the appropriate bills, not having them all tallied, not having made distinctions between what is or is not related, and then making arguments that some treatment is not related. And it is nearly impossible to have conversations about what the value of the claim is when there's just kind of a nebulous argument that some of the bills aren't related. So if I can't go back and forth and say, this is why this $5,000 bill is not deemed related, it just falls on deaf ears like, well, we think it is. So you need to have very specific reasons in those situations as to why you think something is not related, or if something is not reasonable. If the bill is too high for whatever reason, it's best to have the information that you based that judgment upon with you so that I can provide that. People are very, very open-minded in mediation if you can provide them with the underlying basis for your rationale. And like we said at the beginning, if you show up to a mediation and you've got this kind of, you've got this feeling in your mind that, okay, I'm here to get this done. It's a certain amount of pressure and you don't want to just leave. You want to get it done before you leave, right? So if you can give them reasons to alter their position or change their position based on what you say, you're really helping yourself. So bring as much supporting evidence to back up your opinion as possible, and don't just come in with, well, I looked it up on the internet and I kind of saw this thing one time and it sort of said this. No one wants to hear that. No one's going to come off their monetary position for that.
I Googled it, defense won't work, right?
Right.
Well, you got to do your homework, right? I mean, that's kind of the takeaway, is that you got to do your homework. But
exactly.
Well, I know we're running short on time. Before I let you off the hook, just tell people where they can find you. If they're interested in mediating with you, what do they need to do?
The easiest way to contact me is actually through LinkedIn. My name is Winter Wheeler. There's only one of me, thankfully. I'm easy to find. And I work at Miles Mediation and Arbitration, milesmediation.com.
And you have a national practice. You're barred in Florida, Georgia, and New York, but you mediate through the country.
I do, yes.
Okay. Talar,
Absolutely.
any last words before we sign off?
Yeah, it's all about the origami. I think that you should find a way to incorporate that into your mediations. That's all I've got to offer.
I'm going to try, and I have a 9-year-old son who really likes origami. He had a Japanese teacher a couple of years ago, and they did a lot of origami in class. So, Talar, the next time he does some origami for me, it's all for you.
That just might be the clincher.
Well, you guys, Winter, awesome. Thank you so much. I think we could
you.
talk for like another hour. We'll have to do a part 2 at some point.
I'm in.
So Laura, thanks for joining me as a co-host. You did amazing. Everybody, thanks for listening. If you are listening, hit that subscribe button, whether on YouTube or whatever podcast station you're listening to. Give us a like, a review, a rating. We super appreciate the support. And until next time on The Defense Never Rest, we will see you then.